please share the broadcast. So I'm going to quickly pray, and then by the time I finish praying, we should have our guest speaker on. So, dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this time of fellowship. I thank you for this conversation. I pray that it will plant seeds of information, oh God, seeds that will be used to save lives. I pray that lives will be saved as a result of this conversation tonight. I pray that you would turn around the minds of those who are seeking to commit suicide. I pray that you will settle their spirits and let them know that they have a reason to be here, that their lives has purpose, that they will be missed, that they still have work to do in the earth. I pray that you will quiet their minds and allow them to feel just so deeply loved by you, by their friends, by their family members, to Heavenly Father. And I pray that they will be inspired to just go one more day, and then the next day say go one more day, and each day after that just keep going one more day. I thank you, oh God, that you are a healer, that you heal our hurts, our deep emotional wounds, that you can heal our mind, dear Heavenly Father. Release us from anxiety, fear, worry, depression, dear Heavenly Father. Release us unto freedom. I thank you for Lauren, who is sharing tonight, and I pray that you'll continue to bless, guide, and keep her in all things. Amen, amen, amen. So, Lauren, let me know when you're on. Don't see her yet. And we are just talking about, oh, okay, it says she's here. Let me let you in. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you. Yeah.
So we have a lot of heavy stuff to get into today, but let's start with, you can introduce yourself. You give them a little gist into your background, and we can kind of preface the conversation around that.
So, my name is Lauren. I'm in Toronto, Ontario. So in university, I did a major in legal studies with a minor in psychology. And during my time in university, I did some volunteer work on a crisis/distress line. And I did that for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. And now I'm working in a field completely unrelated. I'm in legal studies. I work for the Ministry of the Attorney General as an executive coordinator. So I'm pretty much removed from my psych background now.
And I remember you getting ready to go on your phone calls. I don't know how you did it with all the stress at university, dealing with, other people's pressures. I don't know if it helped to keep you grounded, to know that other people had so many things going on, to be thankful in your present situation. How was that, being a college student and going to, answer those calls?
Well, so the thing with those calls is that some days they were really, really tough with the stuff that people called me to talk about. But sometimes they weren't as hard as you thought. Sometimes people were just calling because they felt lonely. They really just wanted a friend to talk to, conversation. So sometimes they were a lot more pleasant than they were sad. And I also received a lot of enlightenment from a lot of my calls. I received a lot of wisdom from the stuff that people said to me on the other end. So a lot of the time it was almost therapeutic for me.
Yeah. So, okay, I know I put hotline in the graphic, but I know people have changed it to Lifeline now. So calling the suicide Lifeline, because this will actually kind of talk you off the ledge. So, for some people, you said loneliness. Is that the biggest reason you find that people call in, that they just feel lonely in the place that they are in life right now?
So I just want to clarify, because there are different lines. So there is a suicide. It actually is called a suicide hotline or a suicide lifeline. There's that, and that is specifically geared towards people who are in or at imminent risk for suicide. And then there's also a distress/crisis line. So the distress/crisis line is the one that I worked on. And that is before calling a suicide line. So on the distress or crisis line, it's more for safety planning. It's more for calming people down if they're in distress or crisis, and talking through their problems, getting them to come up with their own solution to the problem a lot of the time. It's a lot of listening, and it's a lot more working together to come up with a plan rather than any imminent risk for suicide. So on that line, if someone were to call me and they were in a suicide attempt, what I would do is I would either call 911 or, I would call 911. There is no either or. If someone.
So we don't hear much about that though. Like, I know obviously you got phone calls, so people knew about it, but we often hear call the suicide hotline. Like, we don't hear if you're struggling, like before you get to that point where you need to you feel like you want to commit suicide, call this line and talk to somebody. You know, like, it's always suicide hotlines, like the end result, like nothing to tell me that there's obviously there's therapists, but nothing to say, hey, call me first. So, but I know Canada is different in that regard. Like, you have a whole month where I think Bell Canada started it. I'm not sure if they did, but where you talk about mental health openly, you have the awareness of these are the options that are available to you, not just when you feel like you're at the mountain ready to jump off, but all along the way.
Right. So that's what the distress / crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So that's what it would do. One thing I have to tell you, and this will be really good for everyone on this live to learn. One thing that we don't say in our language is commit suicide. And the reason for that is traditionally suicide was illegal. And so that language comes from that. But also, when you say commit suicide, the word commit in and of itself has a stigmatizing name. So instead of saying that, you would say taking one's life, is having thoughts of suicide, that sort of language. So you don't say commit suicide.
Do you have the history of why, of the illegal, like how can you make it illegal if they're already gone? Or
I don't understand that either. This is obviously from way, way, way long ago. So I don't really know the legalities behind that. But perhaps what it would be is if you were found to have tried to attempt it, that's when legal action would have been brought against you, or even your family would probably suffer.
Yeah, I think even today, I think with certain, I don't know if it's the same in Canada still, but I know in the Bahamas, if someone committed suicide, like, you may not be entitled to certain benefits through insurance. Not committed suicide, sorry, took their own life. Let me get it together and use the proper terminology. If they took their own life, then, they don't get certain insurance benefits because of that outcome.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. That is correct. I've heard that as well. I think that is pretty universal. I don't know if that's changed. Perhaps in the wake and conversations that we're having with mental health, I'm hoping that will change. But I don't know where people are at in terms of change.
So what do you think is? I know we have the pandemic. What about this time is creating the perfect storm for the rise in suicides?
Well, this is the first time that people really are being alone and sitting with themselves. If you live alone, even if you don't live alone, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't limit it. But it's a very lonely time. And it's also a very desperate time, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, one day to the next. Everything has been happening so quickly, even with the recent events that are going on. Right now is a very, very sad time. Yeah, it's a very sad time in the world. And I think a lot of people have been losing hope or had little hope. And this is sort of, it's a perfect storm. It can put them over the edge, especially, I can't really speak on anyone else's behalf, but I can just talk about how the pandemic was for me living alone. When I was living alone, it was very lonely, and I would get inside my head a lot. And I think that's the place that these negative thoughts and where your mental health starts to suffer, because when you're in your head, you're thinking about all the things that you've done wrong in your life, all the people that you miss that you can't be with right now, all the things that, you know, you're kind of working through because you're forced to, you're just alone.
Yeah.
So I think that is what I would say is the reason.
So when people call, you said, okay, let's go to crisis line. When someone calls the crisis line, are you reading a script, or is every case different and they give you a certain protocol that you would have been trained in and then you answer accordingly? Or are you following like, okay, I said this, if this, then that? Like how scripted is it when they call?
So I'm just gonna work from the beginning so you kind of understand holistically what it's like. So a lot of the time the people on the crisis line, they don't have mental health expertise. So what I mean by that, they're not psychologists, they're not any other mental health practitioner. Usually they are volunteers. And sometimes they can have a background in psychology, for example, or health sciences, because a lot of the time psychology students seek this sort of work out to add it to their whatever they're trying to accomplish in terms of getting into grad school or getting a job, etc. So these are the type of people that you're speaking to. They're volunteers. So after you apply to be on the crisis line, your resume is screened first of all. Then you have an interview. Then once you have an interview, your references are checked, and then you go through extensive training. So the training is, I think when I did the training, it was 2 full weekends, if I'm not mistaken. So 8 hours each day. So
wow.
Yeah, so it's very extensive training. So, and then once you're done the training, you sit on calls with people and you listen to how they handle calls. So to answer your question, it's not scripted at all. People will call in and you mostly let them lead the conversation. So it's a lot less to do with what you have to say and more so to do with what they have to say. So, you know, they call in and you ask them, you know, how are you doing? How's it going? You try to keep it neutral, essentially, because you don't want to be overly bubbly and you don't want to, you know, sound really miserable either. So you kind of have like a neutral tone when you answer the call. And then, you know, you let the person lead the call. So if they want to talk about how their day is going, you keep it there. Sometimes people will call and they'll say, you know, something's really bothering me, and you give them time to talk about that. So it's really not scripted. The only time when it does become scripted is when someone indicates that they may be at risk to themselves or others, and that they may be considering taking their lives. So in that moment, there's a suicide checklist that you go through with the person, and you try to make it as natural as possible. So some questions that you would ask, for example, is, you know, what are the supports that you have? How long have you been thinking about this? Do you have a plan? Do you, after you have a plan, you know, is there a time when you're going to do that plan? And so you assess their imminent risk. And so that's when it becomes a little bit more scripted. But even still, you're weaving conversation in there and trying to get the person to talk to you and open up as much as possible.
So let's talk more about that, like the red flags that are making you think, okay, maybe we need to take it in this direction. I need to assess your risk. So when you start to see, okay, this may be, you know, not just my everyday, just crisis check, someone needs to talk, but they actually may be at risk and they may not even know that they're at risk.
What are the things that they would say?
Yeah.
So some things that they would say is, I feel like I can't go on. I don't think that I can handle this situation anymore. You know, I feel like giving up. And then at that moment, and, you know, this is something really important that I want people to know. A lot of the time people think, oh, don't mention suicide. If you mention suicide, they're going to do it. It's a really crazy myth. And it's not true. It doesn't matter if you mention it or not. If someone is thinking about suicide, it's already on their mind. And you mentioning it isn't necessarily going to make that worse, depending on the type of support that you provide to that person. So if you know, you're talking to someone and they're speaking in a way that makes you think that they're considering taking their life, you can just ask them, are you thinking about harming yourself? Are you thinking about taking your life? And there's ways that you can prime up to that as well. You can say, you know, the types of things that you've expressed, you've said that you feel like you can't go on anymore. You've said that you feel like you're going to give up. A lot of the times when people feel that way, they want to take their lives. Is that how you're feeling right now? And you get them to open up. And so the thing with that as well is a lot of people think, oh, don't talk about it, because then they're going to think about it and they're going to want to do it. That isn't true. If you allow someone and give them that space to talk about it, you can actually begin safety planning with them. You can begin, you know, talking to them about resources that they have or support systems that they have. You can begin, you know, talking to them and encouraging them to maybe see a doctor, to talk to their doctor about how they're feeling. And, you know, if appropriate, maybe the doctor will prescribe them medication and that sort of thing.
What does safety planning look like?
So safety planning would look like, for example, if someone is at a higher risk for suicide, you would ask them, you know, what is the plan that you have in place? And if, for example, they say, I want to take pills and I have my pills with me, safety planning would look like, okay, are you able to leave the room where your pills are? Or are you able to throw your pills in the garbage? You know, and of course, priming it with, you know, I'm really concerned for your safety, and I'm asking you to do this because I care about you and I don't want you to take your life. Can we come up with a plan together so that you stay safe? And then you can even ask the person, you know, can you think of a plan to keep yourself safe? And that's really empowering. When someone else comes up with a plan to save their own life, that's more powerful than you telling them what to do, than you saying, you know, do this, do this. Of course, you know, if somebody wants your feedback and your help, you can help them. But if you ask them, you know, what can keep you safe tonight, and they tell you, that's a lot more effective than you just telling them what to do. And it's empowering.
And then, as a friend, would you repeat this every day? How are you keeping yourself safe today? Safe today? Is that something you repeat until they exhibit that they're not at risk?
So, you know, it's a very fine line, because if you're, and this is me just thinking about it in terms of practicality and my own personality and how I am, if you message someone every day in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, eventually they're not going to want to share with you anymore. So I'm not saying that that's not something that you shouldn't or can't do. I'm just saying be mindful of how you do it. You know, I think it's important to let the person lead the conversation. So if you message someone and say, hey, how's it going today? You know, I just wanted to check in on you. And you don't know what they'll say. Maybe they're not feeling the same way that they did yesterday. Maybe they're going to say, you know what, today I feel so good, and I'm doing this, and I'm thinking about this, and I feel really good. Then, you know, that's a lot different than coming with them like how they were feeling yesterday. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because they might not be there anymore. They might actually be feeling a lot better. So I always think it's important to let someone lead the conversation rather than coming into the conversation with an assumption.
I understand. That's really good. Even for like our theme this month is friendship. So even like, you know, allowing people to lead conversations, period, you know, to get to understand how they're doing. So I had a thought, but anyway, I can't remember that thought. So I'll go back to this one. So one of my questions is like, I know when I was in a dark place, I never thought of killing myself, but I didn't care if I died. Like, I didn't care if a car hit me. I didn't care if, something happened to me and I wasn't here anymore. So if I call and like I'm at that place, are you going to like recommend that I call someone else, or am I still like crisis hotline? Let's talk this out. Why do you feel this way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you were to call the suicide prevention line, they might
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, I can see that you're having a really sad day, but you're not in imminent risk for suicide. Is it okay if you call the crisis and distress line? So they would direct you to that line. So
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, there's still a place for you on that line. Definitely. I've had hour-long conversations with people where we just talk through their problems. I usually try to get them to solve it. So I usually ask them questions to come up with ways that makes them feel most comfortable with planning their own life and figuring out their own problems. So for example, if they tell me, oh, I want to do this, I'll say, okay, and what does that look like for you? So together,
Mm-hmm.
we talk through what it is that they're going through.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so you mentioned also a scenario of like if you have pills, throw them out. What if it's COVID? I live in a high-rise apartment. I'm having these thoughts of suicide, and it's not really practical for me to go live with someone because it's COVID. My family is far away. It's COVID. I mean, like we're getting into a better place now, but what do I do if my whole living situation every day reminds me that I have an opportunity to do this?
So that's a good question, Zemi, and it's a very complicated question because I mean it really does depend. At that point, I would say that person should start considering medication. If you are at high risk of suicide daily, that's an indication that you need to see a professional.
Yeah.
You need to see a professional, right? So if someone like that were to call in the line, what we would do is we would probably send a mobile crisis team over to that person's home and then get them the resources that they need. So that's another thing that the crisis line does. We set people up with resources, and we have a mobile crisis team for those situations where we would need to see someone in person.
That's good. I mean, I'm happy that that exists. I'm thinking now of mental health in general. It's very serious, and I think also it's of becoming a fad where I want to raise my hand and say I have mental health issues, or I have dealt with depression, or I have anxiety. Is that helpful for helping to eliminate the stigma, to help people to get help? Or is that problematic when so many people are raising their hands saying, it's me, it's me, it's me? Is it getting harder to see what it really looks like to really help people?
I mean, that's a little bit, we're going into very dangerous territory because depression looks different on everybody.
Yeah.
I would like to argue that at least at some point in everyone's life, they have had a brush with poor mental health. I don't care who you are. I don't care how successful, how amazing your life is. You've had a moment where you have felt down. And so I think if people want to say that, I have dealt with depression and this is what I'm going through, I don't know that we should be the judge and jury about whether or not they have or they haven't, because we really don't know. We really don't know. And I mean, when you throw in personality disorders into the mix, why is this person saying that they have depression if they've never had depression? That in and of itself is an issue. That to me doesn't seem quite right. You're claiming to have something so serious that you don't have. I mean, I don't find that normal. So I don't think that.
But a lot of people don't know the definition of depression. Right? They think depression is just, I'm sad, I mean, like you may be sad a couple times a month or whatever. Like for me, I think I have seasonal depression. Like I get around the time my mom passed, I get like, don't want to get up, don't want to do a lot. I'm better now, but some people don't realize, I think depression is 3 months or more of intense sadness.
So by the way, forgive me everyone, I'm not a professional.
I know.
So
Neither am
if I
I.
say something that's wrong and you know better and you're in this call and you want to type it into the chat, go right ahead. But I do believe that is true. That for 3 months, in order for it to be
Clinically diagnosed.
no, not clinically diagnosed, but I think there's a different term for it. So there's depression that goes on, like chronic depression, I think it's called. But I mean, it is possible to have situational depression.
Yeah.
It is possible to have, shorter term depression. You can be depressed for a week. It is possible. So I wouldn't say that you need to be depressed for 3 months to qualify as being depressed. I mean, I think if you are exhibiting low feelings for a week, I think that can qualify as being in a depressive state at the very least.
So what type of vocabulary would be helpful for us to describe our mental state? You already said we don't say commit suicide. We say they took their own life, or I'm considering thoughts of suicide. What other types of ways can we describe? Because I think you've used like a low, I think you said low mental health day, or one term you used, but like what kind of terms could we be using to describe our mental health?
I think that, so I feel like I feel like my legal side is really showing with some of these questions. I don't mean to be dancing around them, but it really is different for everyone.
Yeah.
If it really is different for everybody. So when I'm feeling really, really down and sad, I call it the dark place. That's what I call it. I'm in the dark place. For other people, they might say it differently. I think if someone is describing their mental state and you're not really sure what that means, the best thing to do, especially if they're expressing to you as a friend, the best thing to do is to just clarify, what does that look like for you? What are you feeling? Are you sad? Or how sad are you? How consistently sad are you? Those sorts of things, without, of course, coming across like they're on the stand or something and you're cross-examining them. But, clarifying, I think that's the most important thing, because there is no one term that fits all. How people describe where they're at is going to be very different. I'm having a down day. I'm having a low day. I think it can really vary. When I was receiving calls, people would say, I'm not feeling well today. I'm really not feeling good. I'm feeling bad today. And so those are clear, but while they're clear, they're also still quite ambiguous, because, what do you mean you're not well? Does that mean physically? Does that mean mentally? So I think it's a bit of a dance. And, anything to do with language can be a bit of a dance, but especially when you're describing your own mental state, it's very subjective, I think.
Yeah, I thought that was a really great response, though you felt you were being the lawyer. Because that's good. Like, we need to know that it's personal to you. For a child, it may be like, oh, you have big feelings today, or, you just don't feel good today. Like I have, even as recently as this year, I've taken a mental health day. I just didn't feel like going to work. I had big emotions. I didn't want to be bothered with tasks. So I, didn't go to work. But, like we have friends who didn't go through 16 hours of training to deal with our emotions. And as a friend, like I have felt, oh, I'm bleeding on my friends because I have all of these different things. And like, I'm another like perfect storm situation where I have trauma going on and I don't even know what could be the trigger today. So I don't like the idea of, I like having friends to reach out to, but I also don't like being a burden. That's on my side. That's what I deal with. And I have to, overcome that. But as a friend, how can I, like get to those places that I need to get to? Like a lot of people can't handle when you respond, to I'm not okay when they ask how you're doing. They don't know what to do after that point. So what advice would you give them to be a better friend, to know how to respond when someone says, I'm having big emotions today, and or I need more support today, who they don't really know what to do?
So, and I'm looking at the chat. So firstly, someone just said, this is a really great conversation. I feel like I'm a burden sometimes. So I don't think anyone is alone in that feeling. I think that's why we tend to keep a lot of our feelings to ourselves. And some we see in situations where they become detrimental, right? So first, I would say, as the person who is seeking help, if you are worried that you might be a burden and you don't know where someone is to receive you, I think it's okay if you say, hey, do you have space to talk to me today? Are you in a space where you can talk to me today? And, you don't have to say it in that exact language, but I think you get the spirit behind what I'm trying to say. You can approach someone like that. And if they say no, then you know that you can't talk to this person right now, and that's not a place where you're gonna receive comfort. In terms of a friend who hears that, what I would say is, ask the person what they need. I'm really sorry that you feel like that. What can I do for you? What do you need? Can I do anything for you? And when you ask that question, like I said, that makes the other person feel empowered to decide where they want things to go. So, actually, I just wanted to tell someone that. I just wanted to tell someone that I was having a bad day, and that's it. Would it be okay if you gave me a call later? Can we go for a walk at lunchtime if you're talking to a coworker? So as a friend who's hearing that your friend is not doing well, I would say just ask them, what can I do for you? What would help you feel better?
But what if it's a situation where you can get to that person? Like, you don't have space, you don't have time.
So
as a friend, okay, go ahead.
Because I know what you're saying, and sometimes it can be hard to listen to someone else's stuff when you're going through your own stuff. Maybe you're having a day from hell and you don't have the space to provide compassion and support to someone. What I would say is let them know. Say, and if you really care about that person, you're comfortable sharing with them, maybe you can even say, hey, this happened today, and that's why I can't be in a space to talk to you right now. And what I would say is give them a time when they can reach out to you. Say, if you're able to do that, hopefully you can, because that's really helpful, because it doesn't indefinitely delay the conversation. It just lets the person know that today might not be a good day, but can I call you back tomorrow? So I have a really good friend, actually, you know her, Zami, Alicia, and these kinds of conversations where she will send me a message and ask me, are you available to talk with me? And I'll tell her the time. I'll tell her the time that I'm available to talk to her, or she'll do vice versa for me. And then we check in at that time and then we talk. So now that we're getting a lot older, and now that we're getting more responsibility, whether, that's a spouse, kids, family, pets, whatever. Yep. We are very busy, and everyone is, right? So I think if you're just open and honest about that, instead of just saying, no, I can't talk to you today, hopefully you have a good enough friendship and a good enough, relationship with your friend that they can understand that you're not just brushing them off.
Yeah, I love that. I love putting a timeline on it.